All right, we're here, folks. Despite the technology challenge, which we have every night, my sweater looks yellow. It's okay. I'll be from Georgia Tech. It's going to be sweet and sour night. Allie Peak will be back in just a moment. We got lots to talk about tonight, including some changes. The transfer portal working against Florida this time. I know some of you have heard about it, and we'll discuss that. Allie will join me, and we'll discuss what's ahead for the Gator football team. A few reports trickling in now. And we would like to have you join us, talk to us about what's in your life. All right? Stand by. We're going to try to see if we can get up and running here on the program after this.
It's time again for Buddy Martin. Call him up and tell him what you're thinking. But be kind because he's doing the best he can.
Better, stronger, faster.
Mama says that alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth but no toothbrush.
Hey, what if the voice calls while you're gone?
Take a message.
Bye!
You ready, champ?
I'm ready for this my whole life.
I'm incapable of small talk. But that's why you love me, right?
Kind of intimidating to be in the presence of so many great athletes.
Good evening and welcome to the program. I'm Buddy Martin. It's called The Buddy Martin Show for that reason. We're on here sometimes 10 nights a week, sometimes 5, sometimes 3. Tonight's a special night. It's always one we enjoy. We get one of our favorite people on to talk Gator football. She's steeped in tradition. She knows all about Gator football because everybody in her family played it. And she follows it as a terrific podcast. If you've not seen a peek inside the Gators on YouTube with Allie Pete Wilbur, you should be sure and do that because she's informative, entertaining, and smart. So stand by for that in just a moment. Tonight we evaluate what happens when the transfer portal flips around and works against Florida. You know, we're always rooting for the transfer portal to begin, and in some cases in basketball it was. Now something happened. We'll see what you think about it. Meanwhile, thank you for joining the program. Michael Burton, good to see you back. Bruce Green, my man Bruce Green says, my man Buddy Martin. Bruce, thank you. Appreciate that. Toby Permiter, always winning the cash prizes from Spurriers. Michael Burton, Todd Golden will be able to replace. We're going to get to that in a minute, Toby. What else? And Dan Bond, reliable Dan Bond from Texas. Let's go to the Orange and Blue Room and talk to the mother of 2 sets of twins, who, by the way, are adorable. I saw one of them this past weekend. She dresses them alike, and I wonder if she makes Eric dress that way, too. We'll find out. Good evening at the Allie Peak. Well, what's up, Allie?
Hello, buddy. How are you?
Oh, baffled by technology again. Why my white shirt looks yellow. But my producer is very, very sick tonight. I want to wish him the best. Brendan Martin has been in bed for 2 days for the horrible whatever it is going around. So we'll just deal with it. It'll have to be the way it is right now. What do you do, Allie? You always look so great. Everything looks right. Do you have 4 people working in your room there to help you out or what? Is Eric back there?
I really have 4 people working against me to get done whatever.
Well,
but just good luck, I guess. I don't know.
Well, you do it right. You do it the right way, too. So there was a little news today, and I'm going to confess up front and say that I was, and will continue to be, a fan of this guy. I had high hopes for him. And it didn't work out like it doesn't sometimes for a lot of people, which is why they have the transfer portal. But Riley Kugel, a guy who I just so enjoyed as a freshman, thought he had a world of potential. I guess to nobody's surprise because he didn't play much down the stretch. He wasn't reliable enough. Has announced he's in the transfer portal. That's the way of the life in 2024. Is that what it is? 2024. That's what we have to get used to. Yeah. I'm still kind of seething from the whole thing with Trevor Etienne, but a little poetic justice prevailed there. I don't know. What do you think about it, Allie?
Well, with Google specifically, I think I would guess that more has gone on than we are aware of. I think that that's just kind of what I felt like when we listened to the press conference about why he didn't play the last two games of the SEC championship. Obviously, he played a little bit more in the first game of the tournament, but there was a disconnect between the coaching staff and him, whatever that happened to be or whatever role he played in that, we don't know. But I would assume watching that it's not the worst thing for both parties for him to part ways. But I'm not a huge fan of the transfer portal being as open as it is, because I think that in, the good old days, which is totally going to, age me, we would have seen him fight through this adversity. And instead of sticking around to become the player that Golden wants him to be, or the player that Florida needs him to be, or whatever, he's hitting the transfer portal instead. But such is college athletics right now.
I get it. But I like the fact that you have that spunky spirit when you say, don't come to us with that garbage about thanks for all you did for me, see you around. I'll always be a Gator. No, you're not a Gator, never will be a Gator. Once you leave, you're gone. That's it. And I don't like that double standard. You don't either.
I don't either. I don't like that. I think that you can claim a Gator for life if a couple of things happen. If you graduate from the University of Florida, so even if you graduate and then you go play a grad school year somewhere else, I still am going to consider you a Gator if you graduated from UF. Or if you didn't graduate from UF, but you spent all your time here and you went to the NFL, you're also a Gator for life. You are a mercenary if you spend a year on the roster and then head elsewhere. You are not a Gator for life. That doesn't mean that I dislike you. That doesn't mean that I won't root for you in other places. But it does mean you don't get to claim that you're a Gator for life.
Can't have it both ways, that's for sure.
Right.
Google was a mystery because he could jump out of the gym. So at times he'd get on a streak of shooting those threes. At times he was a brilliant defender. He was high-spirited. He was fast. He came in handy a little bit when they got the hand glove and got hurt. He had using his fouls to give, too. I had high hopes for him, but I can see why. I'm not cutting him any slack. It's just time for him to test the waters because he looks around and sees they're not building a team around him, obviously. And he had his chance, and he gave him about a C+, and sometimes he sat completely, didn't get in the game. So disappointing. And not everybody reaches their fullest potential. As a matter of fact, I'd say most athletes don't.
Sure.
It got me to thinking about tonight about the greatest players in football that I've known and seen. I've seen a couple. Admittedly, some of them were personal favorites, but still, for a reason. I just didn't like a guy because he was a nice guy. I liked what he stood for. Sure. I know you and your family is the same way. There's certain things and people. Everybody can't be Tim Tebow, but there are some really great people that did great things, and they have a built-in legacy on this university. So tonight I'm going to mention one of them because there's a movie out about one of them, and many of you will know. I think they'll know, but maybe they won't. I don't know. I'll get to where I get so old. I wonder now if I remember. I'm like, I'm talking ancient times here. But there's one in particular I'm going to tell you about. There's a movie out about him. My friend Freddie Weeby, kindly enough, was able to go to the press conference today and send me a clip, and I'll play that later. So say hello to my wife, Dawn. She's participating tonight in the audience. She helps me out. Hi, Dawn. How are you? She does usually make the telecast, but tonight she's helping. All right, Allie, catch me up. And it is a catch up because so much is going on. Got to get around to some baseball talk tonight because talk about the embarrassment. Getting a run rule by your team that you won, beat 22 out of 27 times was just brutal. It does happen, but not like that. Some things are going well in Florida. Apparently, I'm hearing little sprinkling comments. And one thing I said last week is I like Billy's press conference Saturday because he revealed a couple of things. He actually talked about his secondary, why he liked the young players. And he made a good point about the offensive line. There's some names of offensive linemen I have not heard mentioned very often. So when I say reveal, you don't have to give us your game plan, but say something. And one of the things I said last night on my show, and I mean it, is that what I love about sports is you can be for something. In politics, everybody's against everything, It just seems like, oh, that's terrible. That's what I'm so tired of hearing this. It's the joy of seeing something. I mean, I'm a sucker for shows like American Idol. Okay, I love to see the success of these young people, and I like to be for something and for people, and that's what thing sports can give us if we let it.
Sure. You're right. I think that's actually the danger of where we are in the college football world right now, or in the college sports world in general, is that we maybe don't have these players stick around long enough to give us those success stories that we're looking for. And you're right. Like if Coach Napier were to talk about a walk-on that showed up that is just really impressing, that perks our ears up, right? Because then there's someone that's potentially overcoming the odds. Same concept when we hear about a player that, transfers in and they transferred home because grandpa has cancer and they want to be closer to the family and whatever else, like that immediately draws us to that player. We want to root for them because they're attempting to overcome some odds, because they obviously are a family person, because they have this personal story that we can somehow relate to. And these things, if you are good at the press conferences, if you're allowed to, tell us more than just fluff, that's how you endear your fan base. That's how you can, kind of sack away goodwill, right? For when the rough days come. And that is something that Napier has not done well up until this point. And I don't know if the advice that he's being given is say as little as possible. I don't know if he just is a man of few words, which I do think is highly likely. But we haven't had those anecdotal moments that, we're going to quote 5 years down the road, or that endear us to him in any way. And that honestly may be the biggest miss of Napier's career so far, is missing that opportunity to endear himself to the fan base and endear these players to the fan base, because that's also important too. If we feel like we know the guy out there who missed the tackle, we are far less likely to call for his head, right? We're much more likely to provide grace, or, look at the whole picture more evenly, because we're hoping it's not his fault or whatever. And that has been missing with Napier teams. So good. Maybe he's going to loosen up a little bit. Maybe we are going to learn, about who these guys are.
Well, when you go on and you try it, let's say you have a new company, you come out and you start telling people, and they can tell if you're passionate about it. They can tell if you believe in it. And when you have someone representing your interests, look, Spurrier had it all going for him. Let's face it. He was the golden boy. He had everything. Naturally, he was upbeat, but he had an upbeat personality that made you want to be around him, and you wanted to be around his teams, and you wanted to see, once he learned he could coach, what the outcome would be, because it made you feel good that he was your coach.
He's funny, he's endearing, he's a leader, he speaks his mind, all things that, make a fan base like you.
Yeah, am I going to invest with somebody? Yeah, I'm going to invest with somebody like that. So help me out. Tell me about this team. Why should I invest in them? Where they got this good? I want to like them. I want to be for them. I like Billy Napier. I want him to win. But you just can't be neutral about it. You can't be Switzerland. And I feel like that's why we had too much. Yeah. And speaking of which, the other side of this are the things that we've been seeing, like Princely Mamillan. That's coming out. That's going to happen, I guess.
Yeah.
Is that you're going to get people who are disgruntled, and that's what makes the world go around. And some of the things he said at Ole Miss, it's kind of salt in your wounds. You just see, I'm sure you saw it.
Yeah.
He said,
do you want to read the quote?
Yeah, let me read a couple of quotes here. It says, he, of course, is number 2 overall defensive end of the transfer portal. He said, I feel like I'm getting coached harder than I was at Florida. Some people might say he didn't take any coaching, but anyway, he said Florida was almost like they were just telling me to go use my talent. When I dropped in back in the coverage of Florida, they would just tell me to go, and the coaches here at Ole Miss go into detail about what are being run. And then he ended it with a hammer. He says, I actually feel like I'm being developed here. Okay, I guess that's it.
Well, first of all, that just as well as I do that there's a great chance that was kind of a gotcha question. Reporters want that soundbite that's going to now go viral. And so, he bit, though, on it. And that was, it was his opportunity to say, hey, past is the past. I want to talk about where I am at Ole Miss right now. This is what we have to do. But he didn't. But, listen, I was vastly underwhelmed by Princely last year. I was kind of caught off guard. They gave him number one. And then if you look back at game film, the amount of plays that he loafed or took off, are probably more than he went 100% on. And that's not a great look. But also, the coaches that coached him got fired and now are coaching at Texas A&M. So I don't know that it's this huge, it really it's saying a whole lot about Florida to begin with, because his position coach no longer exists at the University of Florida. And there's probably a kernel of truth into the things that he's saying, or he at least feels like there is. Some of it is good-natured ribbing, probably. And, if I'm Florida, I'm going to put it up on the bulletin board because we play them this year in the Swamp, and I circle it. But, that's going to happen, right? And nobody leaves because they're happy. So clearly, this was a good move for both parties, I guess.
Yeah. A lot of rumors going around. Deandra Gosha saying, I'm hearing about if Billy's let go, Kiffin will be the coach. It's just normal speculation.
Sure.
What I'm getting from people, and the people I know that have a little money, a lot of them, I know a couple, is that they're going to see it through this year, see where he stands in 2025. If he's got it turned around, begin to see some kind of progress, that he'll have a good shot to bring it home in 25 if he does with this new quarterback, etc. But, we know there's a lot of patience in Florida. I think you and I stand about the same place on Billy, don't we?
Yeah. I mean, I want him to be successful. And I said this on your show, and I totally and completely believe it. But rooting against Billy Napier is wanting the pilot driving the plane that you were on to crash. And that is not anything that we are about. Now, I think that it's fair to have honest criticisms of him. I think that it's fair to point out the things that he could and should do better or do differently. And that doesn't mean I don't want him to succeed. It means I do want him to succeed. And I hope he's realizing, X, Y, Z needs to be fixed. But from what I am hearing, I think that the leash is longer than maybe people kind of realize. I think that everybody knows that DJ Lagway being at Florida is tied to Billy Napier being at Florida. And I don't know if you saw Dan Mullen's quotes a couple of weeks back, but
I did, but repeat it.
He's right. When he essentially said, if they believe it's Napier, they need to give him time to build it the way that he wants to. If it's not Napier, who are you going to give the time to? And he's right. And honestly, I know that Dan Mullen is a hot button issue for many people, but Dan Mullen wasn't given the time that Dan Mullen needed. When you think about the fact that he was fired 1 year after going to a New Year's Six game, that's kind of crazy. Set aside what we were hearing was going on in the locker room or whatever. I don't know that I believe there was something so egregious that made sense. Now, it makes sense if you're sure that your next hire is a home run. And I don't know that we can sit here 3 years later and say that he is, but I do think he deserves a shot. Now, Florida's going to have to win some football games next year. I don't think they're going to have to win 8 or 9 of them to keep them, but they are going to need to win at least 6, I would say. And I think that if the beginning of the season starts out rough, it's not a great sign for what's to come, because the back half of the schedule is tougher than the beginning. So if you can't put it together against Miami, UCF, some of these easier Mississippi State, some of these easier teams, it doesn't bode well for you. But he is going to get this season to at least try to figure it out.
Yeah. Out of Pete Wilbur of Pekin Side of Gators, it's Sweet and Sour Night. The Sweet is here. David Moulton will be next. Take a time out. Hear from Jeffrey Melvin, and David Bolton joins. Whenever he comes off on this about, here's the deal. Something happened with Dan Mullen, but we don't yet know about, because he had a run-in with the law. We'll talk about that next right here on Buddy Martin Show. Jeffrey, you do a show where you ask a lot of questions. I've got one for you right now, okay, regarding how do you know whether your case is being handled right and what to do about it. In medicine, you can get a second opinion if you're not satisfied with the doctor's opinion that they have. And do you have that in law? Can you do that with lawyers?
Yeah, buddy. As a matter of fact, we get quite a few calls from folks that have signed up, particularly with the big box law firms, that they do a hell of a good job of putting ads on TV, but after that, they don't really measure up to the way we try to create a client experience that's outstanding. And we're always willing to review a case and give a second opinion, just like with a doctor, because not all law firms are created equal.
I guess that's the normal thing. Just go to Meldon Law, Google it, and find out, and just give them a call. And like you say, if you come in, you get to see a Meldon. You don't get shuffled off to somebody else. You get to see a Meldon, and that's good to know because a lot of people don't know how to do that stuff, like me. And maybe you can coach us. All right, thank you, Jeffrey Mello. Right to the Orange and Blue Room. He's there. Here comes Sour. It looks sour tonight. Why y'all say that about him? Looks pretty sweet to me. I don't know if sweet's the right word, but hi, David.
Hey, buddy. Good evening, Allie. Hope you're feeling better.
I am feeling better. Thank you for asking.
Good.
So the question on the floor, let's get right to it. We talk about, Mullen saying that Billy needs more time, and we all agree to that, I think. I heard Pat Dooley say yesterday, I don't often quote Pat Dooley, but he and Robbie were talking about me. I happened to hear it. And he said, why doesn't Florida go for the home run? He said, I'm not saying they should fire Billy, but if they do, why do they have to take a coach and win it? Why can't they go get the guy? And I guess that would be like Lane Kiffin. I don't know. That's one way of thinking about it. I don't know what you hear, but remember, Dan Mullen had show calls against him. Mm-hmm. He got in trouble recruiting, and we didn't know about this for months. If you go back to the press conference, you'll see one little hiccup when someone asked about Mullen's long-term future, and he made a reference, and Scott Strickland was there. He said, I guess I'm all right, right? And Scott said, yes. So something was going on behind the scenes with Mullen. David, did you sense any of that?
First off, this seems so long ago. But also, I thought that was Dan's sense of humor, to be honest. I'd have to see the videotape again. I thought that was Dan playing sheepish for one of the few times that he ever did it. I didn't think the recruiting violation was a big deal, to be honest with you. I know it's a bigger deal at Florida than it is most other places because Florida doesn't get in any trouble. But I mean, in the grand scheme of things, hell, Jim Tressler got fired over tattoos, and we thought it was, the end of civilization when he committed that violation. And Kelvin Sampson got fired from Indiana for too many phone calls. I think a lot of stuff now, upon further review, looks pretty silly. But
had we not been saved by this lawsuit in Tennessee, I would assume that the NCAA handling of what's going on at Florida currently would have probably have been stronger than what happened to Dan Mullen.
Yeah. To me, it's remarkable to me that Dan failed as a recruiter as badly as he did. Yeah. It's stunning, the Gator football program, what he inherited, and he coached it up really well for 3 years, basically, essentially 3 top 10 seasons in a row. I know the last one they lost, they lost to Bama, and then they mailed in a bowl game, so they fell out of the top 10. But, essentially he had 3 top 10 seasons in a row. He goes to 2 New Year's Six bowls, an SEC 3, an SEC championship game, and then to see a year later how badly the cupboard really was, you realize that. So was the Florida football program an iceberg, and all we saw what was above sea level, and we didn't see anything below the water.
Don't his class averages average out to about what Napier's class averages have been?
Well, I know, I know, but
and the wins are different.
They are. Well, I mean, Dan was an exquisite play caller, and Dan could turn chicken.
Dan could win with other people's players,
right?
And we were okay with getting somebody who is not as exquisite of a play caller in exchange for getting someone who is a whiz recruiter. I also think, though, that honestly, I think Dan would do better in this era than he did then. I think they both would do better in the opposition's era, if that makes sense. I think Napier is an incredible recruiter. I think NIL makes it more difficult for him. I think NIL would have made it less difficult for Dan Mullen.
I agree, because Dan would have basically hired a bunch of recruiters, and he would have turned to the Fred Weebies of the world, and he would have said, get the money. It's all about the money. And
yeah.
And then Dan would have X'd and O'd it. I mean, that's what Dan reminds me a lot of Chip Kelly.
Yeah.
Okay. Chip really wants to call plays.
Yeah.
Chip really wants to call plays. Dan, I think, wants to call plays. I would have no problems handing my offense over to Dan Mullen and saying, here you go. Here's what I'm giving you. Knock yourself out. I think Dan would do a great job.
I think
he's one of just let me say this. I'm sorry, Allie. He's one of the few play callers that I saw over 18 years that could put a Nick Saban coach team on its heels.
Yeah.
And he did it with inferior talent. I mean, Dan was an exquisite play caller, but he clearly did not do a good job recruiting. Clearly. And that the formula that worked at Starkville, okay, first off, it was not the right formula to bring to Gainesville, and then it didn't work as well in Gainesville.
Sure. Well, I think that he always, at Starkville, was able to win with slightly less good talent than the SEC teams around him. And I think that he prided himself on the fact of, like, listen, I can take your B guys and beat your A guys with them because I can coach them up to that point. But I think there's a couple things at play. One, I think that Scott Strickland does operate still to this day under we're Florida. You're lucky to come play here. This is a great opportunity. It recruits itself. And I think that was a trickle-down thing. I think that was Dan Mullen's attitude. This is Florida. This is, you should want to come play here. Why do I have to sell you on it? And that's not the era that we're in. Somebody commented about asking Dan about recruiting, and it's not recruiting time. I really dislike when this is brought up because, one, you have to know Dan's personality, and he's incredibly sarcastic. Two, he was trying to talk about his players and the game and what was going on right there. I don't believe for 1 minute that he was serious about, like, oh, we don't talk recruiting in, September, October, November. We wait until January for that or whatever. I think that it was, listen, we're focusing on the game at hand right now. Like, we're not talking about high school players. We're talking about our players here. And I do think that kind of gets misconstrued. But I also know Mullen on multiple occasions said stuff to Eric and I about how difficult it was to maneuver within what the UAA would allow versus what was being allowed at other universities, and how difficult, essentially, Florida was always going to follow the rules. Florida was always going to walk the straight line. Florida was, never going to look in gray areas that a lot of these programs were already looking to prior to NIL, and that they would get recruits that would come in and say, hey, they offered me XYZ. What do you got for me? And Florida would say, well, we've got the rules. We're following the rules. This is what we've got for you. And I know that was already starting to be a hindrance. That's not an excuse. This is Florida. You have to do better than that. But I think that his frustration wasn't with recruiting. I think his frustration was the brass at Florida. And I think Napier's seeing some of that too.
There's some comments going on the message board here about the fact that there was a sense perceived correct or not. And maybe that's the reason, Allie, that you just said. I'm sure that is part of the reason. The Mullen kind of emotionally quit on the team.
Yeah.
I believe that, yes.
Yeah. And I think, especially after the loss to Alabama, David, it's like he mailed it in. That was it. I think his team felt like he quit on them. So I don't know what the deal is on that, but I had high hopes. David, you and I were just off the charts about him being named the coach.
Yeah, well, and I mean, listen, Florida would literally kill for those first 3 years right now. I mean, it's funny. He was succeeding, and then he was a failure.
Yeah,
and it was like, wait, what? What just happened?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's exactly
imagine
right.
had they beaten that Alabama team, which they were so
They
close
could have.
to.
They had a shot.
Such
They
a
had a
good
shot.
game. They had a chance. trajectory, it's astounding to think how fast it just all unraveled
Yes.
at the end. And you hate to say that. And I always said firing Dan Mullen is punting on third down. Maybe it really works out, right? But when you fire a coach who 3 of 4 years gets you to a New Year's Six bowl, no matter what's going on, it's punting on third down. And we're kind of on third down again. So it's interesting to see what's going to happen.
Well, and also, if Billy Napier doesn't work out, to me, when Scott gets fired, okay, what I would say to him over a drink was, listen, it's one thing to fire Dan Mullen, but you had to have somebody lined up that was better than Billy Napier. I mean, you got to, if you're going to pull the trigger on Dan Mullen, it's because you got Lane Kiffin coming. It's because you've got, somebody, Lincoln Riley. You've got, come on,
name.
You're not firing Dan Mullen for Billy Napier. You're not doing that, are you? So that's the other thing that's working against both Billy and Scott right now.
Correct. You look again. You punt on third down. It better be for a damn good reason.
Exactly.
You've got to have a winner lined up, and you know what? Hopefully Napier is that winner. But there is nothing that I could see that we can look at from the past 3 years and say we got better. XYZ. We landed a top-notch quarterback, and that is huge. That recruiting class, he out-recruited our record, and that's huge. But overall, if you look at where Florida finished in the recruiting rankings, it's not good enough.
I don't want to say I'm just an old guy, being an old guy remembering, but I am an old guy remembering old times. And I've seen this movie a few times. I saw this movie when Ray Graves was coach, and they want to get rid of him. He got lost to Georgia 51-0, and he made a deal with the devil that he would step down that nobody knew about the next year until they came along. And we're going to have a clip a little later about Carlos Alvarez, who the movie is about. But the Super Subs came along that following year in what was the year? I'm drawing a blank on it. Anyway, so the Super Subs came along the following year, and Ray Graves went 9-1-1, and they didn't anticipate that, and it was quite a year. And he did play in the bowl game. Doug Dickey was hailed as the potential savior in the wings. I remember people talking about it. Other people. He won the SEC at Florida, at Tennessee. He was a Gainesville guy. He was the perfect choice. He was going to come in here and slay them. And the Super Sauce were there, and they thought, boy, he got reason. Alvarez, always great talent. He came in, and it fell flat on his face. It was really just a disappointing heartache for everybody who was a Gator fan. So there is no guarantee of any one coach. You certainly have better odds when you have someone. Most people are saying Lane Kiffin. There's no guarantee Lane Kiffin would be successful here. His odds are pretty good.
Well, I'll say this. Based on his track record, if Lane Kiffin was the Florida head coach and they didn't win, you'd have to seriously look at the way Florida does business, because Lane Kiffin won at FAU and he's winning at Ole Miss. So if he came to Florida and didn't win, I would blame Florida. Because Lane's proven he can lead a program. Lane's proven he can recruit. Lane's proven he can win. Okay, so if he came here and it didn't work, I'd have to question, well, what's the Florida organization? What's going on?
If you looked at Dan Mullen's track record prior to coming to Florida, wouldn't you say the same thing? This is a guy who...
Yeah.
Well, David,
we both said the same.
And he won.
Who won. And so I think that brings us to the bigger thing, is that if Napier does not pan out, we have far bigger problems and question marks than who the next coach at the University of Florida is. Because I think if Napier doesn't pan out, it's bigger than the head coach.
Yes.
It's the athletic director. It's the UAA. If Florida becomes a coaching graveyard, so to speak, maybe it's not the coaches that are coming in. And I hate when people say Strickland hasn't hired anybody successful. Look at Mullen, look at Napier, look at whatever. These are people that were successful before they got here. And these are people who were hot names, not just for us. It's revisionist history to act like, he just plucked this guy out of obscurity. LSU was talking to him. This was a hot name. Dan Mullen was a hot name back then. We attracted what we thought was going to be great talent, and it hasn't played out. And it hasn't played out since Urban left. And maybe Urban and Spurrier are just such incredible talents and such big personalities that they could overcome some of the things that are working against these guys. But I do think there's some credence that it's bigger than just them, and there's some changes needed.
Let's assess what happened to those other coaches. There were some other guys. It looked like, I didn't feel that way. Looked like Muschamp was the perfect hire. He was, he was Mac Brown's waiting to be head coach in Texas. He had a Florida background. He was really highly regarded. He was sought by other people. You think he came in for Urban. He made his mistake, unfortunately, not embracing what Urban done, but kind of saying, well, that's Urban's way. This is a new way, and we're going to change it. And you know how coaches do things like that. I didn't particularly like him from the beginning, as far as that. But you say, okay, well, they go through one by one after that. McElwain, great success, Alabama.
I got it. Not to be rude, but to be honest with you, with the way the landscape is now, every single coach pre-2021 doesn't matter. I mean, the rules are so different now. It just is, buddy. It is.
Wait, David, it's not the rules I'm talking about.
No. But to be able to accumulate the talent necessary to coach it up to win. The rules are so different now. I mean, whatever, Will was the perfect hire. These guys, McElwain wasn't. McElwain was a B hire at best.
But he could move the football.
And yes, he could, and he brought in good talent. I mean, Dan took that talent and did really good things with it. I mean, Jim couldn't handle the job, but Jim actually day-to-day didn't do a bad job. He just couldn't handle it.
Yeah, okay, so the point is, I'm not saying that who was fit for what era. I mean, Doug Dickey was the perfect hire of that era, too. And it didn't work out for 10 years. It was a colossal mistake. You can go through, let's talk about what happened after let's talk about the coaches in the past, how they've been. Who are the best coaches as far as hired besides Urban and besides Steve? I mean, Ron Zook was a hell of a recruiter, by the way. But Jeremy Foley got caught there in a crunch because he put all his bets down on other people. He wanted to go hire, big name coaches that he thought he had to bag, and they weren't available. So he was third choice with Zook, and he had to take him. Zook was not a bad football coach. He was a hell of a recruiter, And so
Zook's biggest problem was that he was a micromanager, which is funny because I think that that's something that could be said about some other coaches at Florida. But that was Zook's downfall.
Yeah, it's funny. Zook had great recruiting classes. He left Urban a lot of talent.
He did.
And Zook also had great moments. I mean, he won in Tallahassee. He beat LSU. The only loss that LSU had in their 2003 national championship season was Florida in Baton Rouge.
Right.
I mean,
I was there. That was wonderful. In the rain, 3:30 game.
I mean, didn't Zook beat 2 number 1 teams in the country during his 3-year tenure? And I mean,
my memory's not that good, but it sounds familiar.
Zook actually had some really nice moments, but at that point in time, 20 years ago, if you lost at Starkville, you could no longer be the head coach.
That's true.
That decision was made on the plane on the way home from Starkville. So,
Allie, I thought it was damn near made as Jeremy was walking off the field.
Well, very well may have been, but it was made official on the plane. But yeah, I mean, and Zook was Zook was the best recruiter other than Urban, that Florida's seen in
totally
God knows how long. I mean, Ron Zook can sell ice to Eskimos. Eric and I routinely joke that somebody needs to go snag him and just make him the recruiting coordinator in the SEC because he is so good at it. Muschamp, honestly, if Muschamp doesn't,
I didn't like him, but he should have been the guy. He should have been the guy.
My brother played for Muschamp, and my brother loved Muschamp. I mean, would still to this day run through a wall for him. But it was the Charlie Weiss hire. And But be honest, when we hear Florida's hiring Charlie Weiss as their OC, who among us was not excited about that idea?
I wasn't, and I called one of the coaches and said, "What are they doing up there?" I knew about Charlie Weiss's background. I knew where he coached before. I said, "This guy's hailed as a genius. I don't get it. Why do you like him?" And this coach on the staff said, "Why not? He's got a great resume. He's well thought of. He's a brilliant mind."
Well,
I said, I don't get it. I don't get it.
Former head coach. I mean, all I'm saying is that was a splashy OC hire. But had he made a better OC hire, which at the time, I don't know who that is or whatever, but his tenure turns out differently. Those defenses were some of the best that Florida's ever seen. He was a good recruiter. He was a good man. His players wanted to play for him. But, wrong OC hire. I was at the dedication of Ron Zook Field as well. That was a wonderful, that could not have been more poetic justice. And then he gets carried off on the shoulders of his players.
Mm-hmm.
That was a great moment. That was a great moment.
Zook has some good moments. The people who know him well really like him. Ron and I always got a little crossways early on, and whatever. But the fact is, I thought it was a come down when they tried to go out and hire, Mike Shanahan and come back to Ron Zook. That was a big drop. Anyway, yeah. So we can sit here and talk about it all day long, and the fact that remains is David is hiring the right coach at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and now it's more of a organizational thing than it's ever been, though.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it really is. I mean, it's not NIL; it's pay for play, and to recruit the talent that you need to win, it is simply, here's my price. If you meet it, I will come and sign with you. If not, I'm going to go play here. And by the way, then at the end of that season, the price remains the same or it goes up. Okay, and you have to be financially prepared to pay it.
Yeah.
Even Nick was going to experience that. The Alabama discount was going away.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's what his 4 and 5 stars were telling him. Nick, we're tired of playing for 20% less than what, our counterparts are making. Either you pay us the 20% more or we're transferring. And Nick's like, I don't want any part of this. And they said, well, then we don't want any part of Alabama. We're out of here. I mean, that's just the way of the world now, which is why I think we're going to have to get a salary cap and make them employees because we're going to have to limit spending. But that's a whole other discussion, and we'll have plenty of times. But I mean, honestly, that's what it's now about. It's now not about more than can he just, sell ice to the Eskimos. It's about he has no chance of selling ice unless he can show the Eskimos the cash.
Right. Well, and Eric and I had this
mercenary, David. It's so mercenary, David.
Well, buddy, it's the God's honest truth.
I know. I don't have to like it. I don't have to like it.
Our 5 head coaches tell me that to my face.
I know.
They could just tighten up the portal rules, and that would go a long way in helping this. And that's something Eric and I were discussing this in our kitchen 45 minutes ago. We were talking about the Princely quotes and what he had said. And we talked about, you can look and find plays of him taking off and loafing and whatever last year. So interesting that he's going to run his mouth now and stuff. And Eric was saying, clearly the team has to be more disciplined, right? Clearly we need to be harder on these guys. And I said, but they can't. These coaches are finding it hard to be too tough on these players because they don't get tougher. They just leave. And, that's the era that we're in. But you can change that a little bit if you can limit the transfer portal moves. If you get one move during undergrad, unless your coach leaves, and then you can get a second one. And if you're a grad student, you can get another one. Outside of that,
that's exactly what the rule should be. And I don't know why they can't pass that. It's common sense. Everybody gets one. If your head coach leaves, you get another. Once you're a grad student, you can, if you want, leave. Boom. That's it.
That's it. And then we wouldn't even have to actually legislate the money because that does it there. There has to be some accountability, some loyalty, it's ruining the sport to just leave instead of get tougher, work harder, get better, whatever.
When you
But
say
it's tough. But
running
it
the
is.
sport, I
But
don't know
think
what you mean by
think
that.
about what's transpired though at the coaching and AD level just in the last few weeks. Though it's really tough to keep coming back, and we're going to try to clamp down on the kids. And Allie, I'm 100% behind everything you just said. But we're having ADs go from Washington State to Washington. We're having guys who are in the Nebraska Sports Hall of Fame leave Nebraska for Texas A&M. I mean, we're having literally an AD who was on a job 6 months leave.
Yeah.
I mean, it's difficult for the sport to look at the athlete right now and say, hey, we got to rein in this transfer portal. And the athlete's right. You're probably right, but you may want to rein it in on yourselves too.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just can't live in a world and believe that money is everything. I know it's a big part of it. Well,
I'm sorry,
David,
buddy,
David, it's not everything.
It is. No, buddy. It's
no in life. I'm talking about in life.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Well, I thought we were talking college.
In life, and I understand the importance of the NIL, the money you pay the players. I get that, but in the reality, it's not going to buy you a coach. Let me ask you both a simple question. Since we're talking about it, name me a coach. If Billy was fired tomorrow, name me a guy that you would want to go after, and don't say Lane Kiffin.
Why not?
Because I don't.
Why not?
It's the obvious answer. Give me somebody. Give me another name that's fresh. I tell you one I hear all the time, and I say it, and you go, "Oh no, not that old guy." I don't even necessarily think it's, but the one I hear over and over and over again, and so it's not proven he can't do it. I guess. I guess we'll always be hearing it. And his track record's been good. He's won at every level. He's a great Gator. And Kerwin Bell, if you talk to ask Shane Matthews what kind of a coach he is. So ask the people, and yet he's never gotten, here's Da Vinci is saying, Kerwin Bell, he's never gotten a shot here. I don't know that he would be the answer, but they tried everybody else. Why not give him a chance?
I mean, I'd take Jed Fish. Right? Like, he's a Gator. He's got ties here.
I'm a huge Fish guy. Huge Jed Fish guy. Huge.
And buddy, and as far as Kerwin goes, I love the concept of bringing Kerwin Bell home. I don't know how that's a whole lot different than the Billy Napier hire or the Jim McElwain hire. It might work, and I would love for it to work because I'm a big Kerwin Bell fan, but that is not a splash hire to anybody but, Gator fans who understand the history that he has here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me ask you about this. What
listen,
go ahead. Go ahead.
Now, I'm a little nuts. Like, people asked me who Louisville should have hired as their men's basketball coach, and I said Rick Pitino. That's who they should have hired. Okay, yeah. And they should have then said whenever he's done, they should have hired his son. I mean, I'm sorry. Do we want to win, or we trying to win a presser? I mean, listen. I would even after Lane Kiffin, I honestly would call Urban. I would call him and at least have dinner. I would say, listen, your style, can it work in the mid-2020s?
Come save us.
Okay. And then, but here's another reason why I want Lane. Lane is killing it in the transfer portal at Ole Miss. Why? Because their organization is set up. So that's another thing that I think Lane Kiffin would bring to Florida. In the interview process, Lane would ask questions about, so how are we doing this? How are we doing that? And he'd look right at him and go, well, that's not how we're doing it at Ole Miss. We're doing it this way. We're doing it this way. We're doing it this way. That's why I got 14 prime transfers this offseason to Ole Miss. Why are these guys not going to Florida?
Money.
Can somebody answer me that?
Yeah, Shane Matthews, who knows this landscape well, said the Grove Collective's got a ton of money.
There you go.
Let me get back to it.
They've grown it from Lane. Lane has been very vocal about that. That's how they win. Think about his press conference and honestly, looking back, how calculated it is. Midway through last year, he has a comment in a press conference where he says, well, we got to have more money to be able to do that.
Yeah, and he just flat out said it.
Flat out said, if we want to compete with them, we got to have more money. And guess what happened? Their collective grew. because he said the quiet part out loud. And that's the kind of thing that these programs that need more money, Florida's one of them, need to say, own it. You know the difference between us and Georgia? They have 25,000 members and we have 5,000 or whatever those numbers are. That's the kind of thing that has to be said to light that fire. There's some kind of endorsement that has to happen there.
I mean,
But
if we had a 12-team playoff last year, Ole Miss is in it, right?
yeah.
I mean, Ole Miss would have made the playoff last year. So the people who don't want Lane Kiffin, honestly, I'm dumbfounded if you don't want Lane Kiffin. I mean, what? I mean, seriously, he had 2 double-digit win seasons out of 3 at FAU. All right, he's gone to 2 New Year's Six Bowls at Ole Miss, for goodness' sake.
I don't think anybody said they didn't want him. I think what I said was name somebody besides Lane Kiffin, because that's everybody's choice, and I wanted to hear what some other candidates might be, because it may come down to that. And let me remind you of one thing: the game changer. I know the game changer was money. When Charlie Pell was here, and he got Ben Hill Griffin to write that big check, it changed a bunch of things. So I get the money part, but still, there has to be some controls. There got to be some guardrails. There got to be somehow someone's got to rescue the game.
If, David, you made the comment about calling Urban, and I think that honestly, the more interesting the hire that happens if you fire Napier is who replaces Strickland. And I don't think that the Urban of old coaches in 2024, 2025 with the NIL stuff, but I think Urban is who you call as athletic director, because I think that's somebody who could completely get that structure in line and be prepared for, this new era of college football. You can bring in some guy who's willing to wheel and deal in the transfer portal and handle it differently than it had to be handled back when Urban was here winning championships, but he'd be a hell of a person to lead the athletic program.
Okay. I'm hoping we don't have to have this conversation again soon, because you're right, David. You got to stop doing this at some point. You cannot just keep hiring and firing coaches. And if you look at
and Allie and I and you as well. I mean, we're all on the record as saying, we're keeping Napier for 2 more seasons.
Right,
minimum.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, because also when I was in the waiting room here, and Allie was talking about how DJ is tied to Napier. Well, then no offense, and we're not firing the coach. I mean, if the 5-star quarterback's leaving, if we fire the coach, then the only way I'm firing the coach is if Lane Kiffin has signed. I've got the contract in the drawer.
Right.
Then I'm going to risk losing DJ because I know Lane can replace him. Never mind the fact that in theory the kid would go, oh, hell, I'll stay and run your place.
Okay, I'm going to do this real fast. I'm going to pay a bill, and I want you guys to tell me, do you see any increments of change in the last couple of weeks? I know it's hard to tell if you aren't there, but we all pick up bits and pieces. And then tell me what Billy's next move needs to be. But first, I'm going to tell you about North Central Florida's newest premier independent diagnostic testing facility that we Titan MRI. And now open and serving the greater Gainesville and North Central Florida area, focused on you, the patient, having a great customer service experience. Most people lead a busy life, and although have regular business hours, they also need special treatment on appointments. And they give you that at Titan. They can change your appointments to evenings and weekends to fit your scheduling needs. Check them out. They have modern equipment with a larger borehole than usual, and gives people who get claustrophobic like David a better experience when you go to get one of those MRIs. TitanMRI.com. Okay, what's been happening in Gainesville? Are there any changes for the favorably in increment, Allie? And then what does Billy need to do next?
Billy needs to win. That's what Billy needs to do next. That's what winning cures all ills. But yeah, I think there's been a lot of movement that has happened this offseason. We're going to see whether or not it plays out, but I think it's a great sign that he understands that change is needed. And, we're going to see. I think you're going to see us pick up some more kids in the transfer portal in the spring. I bet we get a wide receiver or two. Would love to see if we pick up another offensive lineman. I think Billy has made a good amount of changes. Now it's time to see whether those pay off and win. That's what he can do next. Win.
David?
Allie's second point was what I was going to say, which is first off, whatever changes and whatever he said in the last 3 weeks mean nothing to me. We need more dudes. All right. And he needs to go and hit the second portal season, and a half a dozen kids need to walk in the door during the summer. I mean, and I know Gator fans hate when I compare their program and where it's at to anything Florida State, but the similarities between Napier's first 2 years and Norville's first 2 years are a lot of similarities. In fact, Billy's record's better. Norville was 8-13. Both seasons were losing seasons, and he had a great offseason before year 3, recruiting and the portal. And as we all know, they were better set up in NIL and all that. But that's why. And what did he have? A quarterback. Now, this is the one thing, Allie, Florida's set at the quarterback position. I mean, the most important position they're set at.
Yeah.
So that's why just improve the talent elsewhere and better organize your team so that 11 guys are on the field at all times, and we stop the pre-snap
Control what
penalties.
you can control.
Exactly. Just do the little things that you haven't done those last 2 years. Improve the talent here in the next 60 days if you can. And quite frankly, you've got the quarterback play that should be able to win close games.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to let you guys give me your one or two favorite Gator players, personally and otherwise. And I'm going to play a short clip from a movie. It's actually a press conference tonight, thanks to Freddie Weeby, about Carlos Alvarez's new movie. Carlos is talking here. This new movie's coming out. I think it's out now. They were going to do it earlier, but COVID stopped them. If you saw the special on TV, it was terrific. Carlos is a unique human being. And I just want to play a clip from this and tell folks this movie is coming out soon. Stand by. Can you guys hear that? Your comment about your favorite players and why. Allie, aside from your family.
Aside from my family, okay, so I actually tweeted about this earlier in the week. Jack Jackson is one of my favorite all-time Gators, and he threw a wristband into the stands. It was Florida, Tennessee. I was probably 10 years old, maybe even younger than that. And I caught it, and it's still in a box somewhere in our memorabilia room, like as this moment. And he one of my all-time favorites growing up.
Jack Jackson, what a player, had more number one at the end. I remember sitting in the bus with him going back to Mississippi, a state he had great disdain for racial reasons. And what a great player he was. One of Spurrier's best. David, you got a favorite?
Reggie Nelson. I thought
the eraser.
I thought he was amazing. I didn't think you could play the safety position at that level in college. I thought it was every bit of Ed Reed at Miami. I thought in 2006 he was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
What do you all remember, if anything, about Carlos Alvarez?
I mean, I only know stories of my dad and grandfather telling me about him. I mean, I wasn't alive when he played, but
and where I grew up, quite frankly, I mean, the first time I saw the Florida Gators on television was playing Florida State in the 90s, to be honest with you. I mean, because the Florida Gators never appeared on TV in the Northeast, and that's where I lived until I was nearly 30. So,
well, if I can play this, I'm going to try because it's the movie is coming out. This is the press conference tonight. Freddie Weeby did this for us.
Let's kind of open it up to the audience. Mr. Tom.
Yeah, so Carlos, everybody thinks it was you and John just lining up that very first three plays. But I'd like you to go back and tell everybody how you stretched that cornerback each play.
Right. So Houston really they love to play a zone, a two deep zone, and with their corners, kind of playing you man to man for about 10 yards, but then
Drop in at the end with the watch Carlos talking about the Houston game that's so famous. That whenever they went out and beat Houston that year, and how he was able to beat the coverage of Houston, and it was ranked, by the way, preseason #1 by some. When on the third play, John Reeves hit him on a 70-yard bomb. Remember, this is a team that 3 years before had thrown 2 touchdown passes the whole year, and to have a team excited like that and have him. And Carlos says a movie coming out. He was such a unique human being. He was a Cuban. He was not a refugee. He wanted to make that clear. He was a Cuban American. He's called him. And the special they did was Cuban Comment, and now it's becoming a movie. So anyway, he's always one of my favorites. He's a man of great principle, terrific player, and a guy that stood up in some tough times, and for the people who were less fortunate than he was. So anyway, thank you for Gaspar for sending that clip and Freddie for sending it. All right, guys, I do want to say it's got to be a bit embarrassing when you play a baseball team that you've beaten 22 out of 27. Is that right, Allie? Times, and you get a run rule like Florida did last night in Jacksonville by the Seminoles, Allie.
I never like to lose to Florida State. I think, though, the average Gator fan probably doesn't necessarily realize quite how college baseball works. And, the Florida State series, which I don't know if that's even the right terminology for it, I don't love, because instead of playing a weekend series like we do against Miami, we play a collection of games one at a time midweek. And midweek is the time that you kind of mess around with your lineups. You use your freshman pitchers. You kind of experiment a little bit. The team you see on Tuesday night is not the same team you're going to see Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So I don't love that we never get to see force versus force when we play Florida State like we do when we play Miami or, some of our other rivals in baseball. But, never like to lose to Florida State. I don't think it's a big deal. I think when the postseason rolls around, Florida is going to be in a better position than Florida State. Florida is the better baseball team than Florida State.
Now, obviously, David, you don't follow this, but you live in Jacksonville now, so you had to hear about it there.
Oh, no, I'm well aware of what was taking place. I will say, though, Allie, the Gators starting pitching so far this year has been abysmal. They've struggled. I mean, they've struggled. They've been a dominant pitching, program for a generation now, and their starting pitching is off to a bad start this year. I trust the quality of the arms that they have.
Are just good enough to make up for it on the weekends.
Right, but I do think if you're a Florida baseball fan, you're like, wow, our pitching's not quite what I thought it would be, and obviously, we're getting into conference play here soon. I mean, I would think you'd need to get it together.
Yeah, well, they're in conference play. They beat Texas A&M. Yeah. They beat LSU this past weekend. Right. They, reigning national champs. And they said it in post game that they know they need to figure some things out, right? That they know that this has got to change. I just think in general, there's no reason to freak out about midweek games, particularly this early in the season.
Totally agree with you about that. The pitchers that you throw out there on a Tuesday and Wednesday oftentimes don't even see the light of day on the weekend.
Right. They're going to be the next year's weekend pitchers.
Right.
Okay, what do you think about Caitlin, the new star of basketball? I see she's been offered $5 million to play in that three-person thing. Have you guys heard about her? Did you see her in Iowa the other night?
Mm-hmm.
She's amazing. What an amazing player. David, you watched her play?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Alec, can she play against the guys, you think?
I mean, she's the best out of the women, 100%. I mean, and she's where a great NIL success story, right? Like this is really, where I mean, her NIL evaluations are off the charts.
What will be interesting? I'm sorry, Allie. What will be interesting is the ball's just a little smaller in the women's game.
True.
And I think in the 3x3 league, they play with a, quote, men's ball. I would be curious. I think she would probably need to spend a good week in the gym shooting with, the bigger ball just to get used to it. I would think she wouldn't shoot it as well as she shoots it now, where she's basically, Steph Curry of the women's game. But that to me would be interesting. I can't turn down $5 million. I don't know about you, Allie. I'd take it.
Particularly not the money that she's going to be looking at in the WNBA, right? This
Right.
is not. This is
I mean,
this
what's
is
a
a big
rookie
thing.
salary? It's like 86,000 or something like that. I mean, come on.
Well, Ice Cube believes in her. He says he confirmed the offer, and he called her a generational athlete who could achieve tremendous success in the big three, as it's called. So despite that, basketball side is different. Anyway, interesting. It's always interesting to see the gender stories work that way. I literally love watching her play. In that game at Iowa, her final home game, I mean, that thing, David, that drew like 5 million people, viewers or something, right? An enormous amount of audience.
Yeah, there was only, I think, one men's game on cable that outdrew it, and I think it was the Kentucky first-round loss on cable. I mean, and I think it was the second highest-rated show on Monday night in all of television. I think only, is it The Bachelor or Bachelorette? Which one are they doing right now? But that one, I think, drew 6 million, and Iowa, West Virginia women's hoops drew 5. And those are the 2 highest-rated things on all of television.
Amazing, for sure. Well, all right. You think Calipari's set now? He's staying, and he's walking on thin ice. This is his time running out at elections in the alley.
I mean, didn't they say he's there for another year?
Yeah, but things have changed for a year, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing in at Kentucky may be a little bit of a leveling of the playing field due to NIL, right? We're going to see the effects of it in basketball. We've talked about this before, even faster than we are in college football. And, I think the talent's being spread around a tiny bit.
David, 30 seconds to let you go to bed. Thank you guys for staying. Give us your take about Cali. Is he there past next year?
Not if he doesn't win tournament games. I think, we have a bar for Billy Napier, and it's somewhere between 6 and 7 that he's, probably 7 that he's got to get to see year 4. I think John Cal's got to see the Sweet 16 minimum. They have one tournament win in 5 years. They have one SEC tournament win in 5 years. Yeah, it's Kentucky.
Good stuff from the great David Bolts and the great Allie Peak Wilbur. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate you. Sweet and sour. Do it again. Take care. Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
All right, folks. Thank you very much for listening and watching. I'm going to wound up with the Independent, with the story about the Rent-Star. I'd like to tell you about the folks at Rent-Star because they're special people doing special things in my hometown of Ocala. They care about the community a lot. They sponsor a lot of things. I've sponsored this radio show for a long time. I want to say publicly thank you for them. They want you to know how much they appreciate your volunteering and taking part in what they do when they do their clinical trials. That's where they find out what they need to know about how we can be treated better. When you go to a clinical trial and you take part in it as a volunteer, sometimes you take the placebo, you don't know. And they do a terrific job. They're looking for people all the time to volunteer for these places. And they wouldn't have the clinical trials without you. Some cases you get study-related medications and no charge to you or your insurance. You might gain access to do investigational medications, devices not otherwise available, and to receive compensation for your time and travel. Rent-Star Medical's research seeking tomorrow's answers to the health questions of today. On behalf of our sponsors and you, the listener, and our guests tonight, I'm Buddy Martin. Have a good night. We're back tomorrow night on Orange and Blue Blood Thursdays.